Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Benedict. I'm a program manager at Mass CEC. Today we're going to be talking about the Climate Tech Testing and Demonstration Assets Program. We're really excited about this program and thanks so much for coming. We're excited to see your concept papers. For those who are a little unaware about the program, it is specifically to help fund capital projects for entrepreneur support organizations that will directly support entrepreneurs and researchers in a climate ecosystem in Massachusetts. Before we dive deeper, I just wanted to introduce everyone on the TDA team. And I'll have everyone jump in and introduce themselves. But we're all very excited to be working with you, and I'll pass it over to Leslie.
Thanks, Benny. Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Nash. I'm a senior program director here at Mass CEC, overseeing our technology to market grant program suite, which includes our newest program, the Testing and Demonstration Assets Program. So look forward to hearing all of your questions and engaging with you all as we move forward with this program. Thanks. I'll pass it over to you, Mariana.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Mariana Miller, and I'm a program administrator on Tech to Market. I work half and half with what we call our ecosystems team, which is supporting incubators and accelerators and other entrepreneur support organizations. And the other half of my work is directly with early stage startups and researchers. So thanks, everyone, for coming.
Great. Thank you, Mariana. We all sit in on the Tech to Market team, which provides grants to many of the entrepreneurs and researchers and ESOs in our ecosystem. And we're really excited to be here. Today, this webinar will probably be around an hour long. It is being recorded, so there's an opportunity for you to review it on our website afterwards if you have any questions. And there's also opportunity for Q&A at the end. Today, we'll also be giving an overview of Mass CEC in case you're unfamiliar. We'll dive into the program specifics like eligibility and what would make a great standout application. And as I mentioned, the Q&A will be afterwards. That mentioned, I will be going over a lot of information. So if you have a question that you really want to remember, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom menu. Drop in your question there at any point, and we'll make sure to answer as many as we can by the end of the program, of the webinar. And without further ado, let's dive in. So, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. Mass CEC is a state economic development agency specifically focused on bringing environmental benefits to the Commonwealth to help meet our climate goals, while also advancing Massachusetts' position as an international climate leader and creating jobs for the state and growing the state's economy. We're very much modeled after other state organizations like Mass Life Sciences and Mass Tech Collaborative that all provide grants, programs, and investments to help bring economic growth in 10, 15, 20 years. One anecdote that I always love sharing that helps my mind wrap around what Mass CEC does is about between 2006 to 2008, the Massachusetts state legislature at the time were asking themselves, what are the industries in Massachusetts and how can we create the next one? So they were saying, we have medicine, we have education, we have trade, agriculture, we have finance. But we want to start focusing on the life sciences. We want to grow biotech. We want to grow the pharmaceutical industry. So they put together this bill and all of these programs, investments, and funding for startups, for entrepreneurs, for researchers, and the supporting organizations tied to it. And hope that in 10, 15, 20 years, there would be a significant return on investment. And today we see that return on investment largely, if you look in Cambridge, in Kendall Square, all of these companies and skyscrapers that haven't even existed for that was 15 years. They're very new. Moderna is a really great example of this, of a company that is under 20 years old, but has had a significant impact in the world. And today we want to do the same thing. So how can Mass CEC implement a similar structure so that in 10, 15, 20 years, we'll see economic payback growth? So we do this work in 4 distinct areas. The first is accelerating decarbonization. These are programs specifically meant to address our most polluting industries. This is buildings, transportations, and the grid. So programs that help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions there. Then we have our emerging climate tech team. That's the team that I sit on, and Mariana and Leslie does as well. And that's the team that this program is embedded within. This is the grants and investments specifically to help new technologies be brought to light, help researchers and startups and established industry players. We also have an offshore deployment team, offshore wind energy deployment team. It's no secret that Massachusetts has expensive electricity. So what can we do to help make it renewable, make it more affordable for Massachusetts residents? And we do this by having offshore wind deployment ports. We have one in New Bedford, Massachusetts. We're building one in Salem. And we also have a wind technology testing center that's dedicated to offshore wind deployment. And lastly, how can you do any of this work without an educated and skilled workforce? So we have all these amazing workforce development programs to help people transition into the climate industry, for people to train in solar panel installation or heat pumps, as well as provide curriculums for schools to help educate the next generation. Since 2010, Mass DEC has already awarded $788 million through programs and investments that has attracted $2.8 billion in private and federal capital. We're really proud about that statistic. We've also developed the first US offshore wind deployment port, as I mentioned, in New Bedford. And through our workforce development team, we have reimbursed 6,500 internships for college and vocational students. So these are companies who are supporting these interns, and we will reimburse their scholarships. It's a really popular program, and we're really proud about that statistic. So in summary, at Mass DEC, our whole focus is what can we do to deliver statewide environmental benefits to combat climate change, while also bringing economic benefits to the state of Massachusetts, including job creation and long-term sustainable growth. Next, we'll be spending most of this webinar diving into the specifics of the program. We'll talk about its purpose, eligibility questions, what the application process looks like, the selection criteria, and what we think about when we're reviewing applications, and a summary just so that we can all remember all the details that were listed. Let's dive in with the purpose. So this program, as I mentioned before, sits in the emerging climate tech team. So our whole focus is how can we grow that innovation and R&D ecosystem. And speaking of that innovation R&D ecosystem, Mass DEC's programs kind of fill this commercialization valley of death in between what's traditional federal research funding and private investors. I'm sure everyone here is familiar that hard tech, like climate tech, takes significant investment. And generally what we start seeing is that federal funding helps with the PhDs and the labs at universities ideate and research these ideas. And then once the technology is de-risked, private investors come in to help scale it up. But in the middle, sometimes technologies can get stuck in the lab. Sometimes great teams are put together, but they do not have the right resources to demonstrate and enter the market. And that's what TDA and specifically a lot of our emerging climate tech programs are meant to do, is to help companies prototype and scale up. And for today's work, we are specifically focusing on how can we influence the demonstration and entering the market with this program. So why TDA specific to Massachusetts? So Massachusetts is a phenomenal R&D ecosystem. We have a lot of great educational institutions. We have a lot of great labs, a lot of entrepreneur support. But when it comes specifically to climate tech, there are not many areas where people can learn how to scale and manufacture their ideas or test and demonstrate it. And this can slow the pace of commercialization and limit economic impact. And if our whole goal is to have companies create their technologies here and then scale here, we need to fill this gap. And that's what TDA is meant to do. So we want to address these barriers essential to sustaining long-term growth, environmental impact, and secure the state's leadership in climate tech innovation. So here's the great one-liner that we love sharing about this program, is that TDA provides capital grants between $1.5 million and $5 million to entrepreneur support organizations in Massachusetts to develop shared infrastructure, equipment, and other capital assets that advance climate tech R&D, innovation, manufacturing, commercialization, and deployment in the state. The key emphasis here is on the word shared. We are hoping to fund projects that will be accessible to as many entrepreneurs and researchers as possible, so that there is sustainable long-term growth here in Massachusetts. I also want to point out that TDA is Mass CEC's first program launched under the Mass Leads Act, and so we're working really closely with the EOED and the governor's office on this program. We're really excited about it. Now to talk about eligibility. Example projects of what might be perfect for TDA are constructing pilot or demonstration infrastructure for real-world testing, installing specialized equipment or fabrication facilities. You can upgrade your shared labs or maker spaces, or even build shared digital infrastructure. I do want to note that capital labor and fringe, as well as ESO operating expenses like rent, staff salaries, and programming costs, are not eligible for this program. Essentially, any equipment or facilities or other assets are perfect for this program, but we will not support capital labor or fringe. It is also worth noting that when we're looking to fund specific projects, we are hoping to fund projects that have capital assets that have a minimum useful life of 10 years. So make sure to consider that whenever you're building your concept papers. The projects must be completed within 1 to 3 years, and there is a 25% cost share required, with at least 20% of that being cash. All costs must be incurred after the grant agreement is executed, so the program or project cannot start until the agreement is signed with Mass CEC. What ESOs are eligible? Nonprofit or public entities legally organized in Massachusetts with at least 5 years of operating history. They also have to have a track record of supporting climate tech R&D. So this could be incubators, this could be innovation centers, nonprofit or public colleges or universities, entrepreneur networks and associations, and economic development organizations. The key part here on this slide that I want to highlight is that the ESOs need to be or have had 5 years of operating history and a track record of supporting climate tech R&D. What that means is if you already have member companies or startups or researchers in your membership, they should account for north of 20 to 50% of your membership. Now, what is climate tech? Our definition for climate tech is pretty broad, and I wanted to highlight each aspect of it. And I'll be going over each of these definitions, hopefully to help you understand what types of programs or what types of projects we are hoping to emphasize or focus on. So mitigation is a really big part of what we consider climate tech. So any technology that helps capture or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The next is adaptation and resilience. So any technology that can help prepare for and respond to the impacts of climate change. And enabling solutions. So leveraging AI, data systems to achieve specific climate goals. For energy, that means increasing renewable energy generation like offshore wind, or improving energy efficiency and modernizing the grid by leveraging batteries and energy storage technology. For transportation, we want to accelerate the transition to zero-emission vehicles or enhance public transit or promoting alternative fuel options. Buildings, improving energy and heating efficiency, transitioning to renewable energy sources, and implementing sustainable construction practices. Adaptation and resilience, so implementing climate-smart planning, strengthening infrastructure, and promoting nature-based solutions to reduce vulnerability to climate change with a specific focus on equity. Industry and manufacturing, adopting carbon-reducing technology and processes, and implementing sustainable production practice through a circular economy. Agriculture, food, and nature, adopting sustainable farming and forest management practices, and developing alternative proteins and leveraging nature-based solutions. And lastly, carbon management, developing and deploying carbon removal technologies, including bioenergy with carbon capture, direct air capture, and blue carbon technology. So if you are an ESO that directly supports entrepreneurs and researchers in these themes, you are ahead of the curve, and we're really excited to see your application. And I do want to note this definition is available on our website and will also be in the slides, this recording afterwards, if you need to take a deeper look. It's also in our RFP, so it lays things out in our RFP, each definition for these topics. Next, we'll dive into the application process. TDA is administered in 2 competitive phases. First, there's the concept papers. A template is provided with the RFP and application materials. This is where you'll provide a brief overview and budget of your proposed project. The concept papers are going to be due September 12th, so a little over a month from now. After the review process, select number of applicants will be invited to submit an in-depth full application, and the outline is also provided in the RFP. The full application will be due November 14th, and the notification of our awards are expected to be in spring of 2026. It's also worth mentioning that if you have any questions about TDA, you can feel free to email us. There's going to be instructions at the end of the slides, but we want to make sure that those questions are due August 12th, and we'll post all the questions and answers August 19th to the TDA website. How to apply concept papers. So please make sure to read the RFP really carefully and follow all the requirements. Failure to comply may serve as grounds for rejection. There's some great tips in the RFP as well, and it outlines everything you need to apply for the concept paper. You'll also want to complete the concept paper template, which is attachment 2. It's on our website and attached to the RFP as well. You want to gather all required attachments, and this includes the authorized applicant signature acceptance form, a W-9 form, the budget worksheet, which is the template we provided outlining the costs of the program or the project you're proposing, your previous fiscal or calendar year financial statements, resumes and CVs of key personnel at the ESO, as well as the people who are gathering the materials for the application, and letters of commitment or support from any cost share partners or any organization that wants to endorse your project. We would love if you can combine all documents into one PDF with exception to the spreadsheet files, and then submit it via email to innovationecosystem@masscec.com by Friday, September 12th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Any application submitted later than that will be rejected. The selection criteria. There is a 4-stage review process for these concept papers. First, each application will undergo an initial screening to ensure completion, meet all the eligibility requirements, and adhere to the guidelines outlined in the RFP. There will be a detailed review. Eligible concept papers will be reviewed by MassCC and external industry specialists. The full criteria and selection criteria are on the RFP, and we'll go over them in the next slide as well. We may require interviews by case. This is just to say we reserve the right to contact eligible applicants and request supplemental or clarifying information for your application. And then we'll select applicants. Selected applicants will be invited to submit a full application, which will include a more detailed plan and a budget. The selection criteria. The detailed selection criteria can be found in the RFP in section 8, and concept papers will be evaluated based on those criteria. We put it as a rubric of 100 points, but some of those criteria might be changed, but we're hoping to stick to this. Each of the criteria have sub-bullets of what we're looking for, and we believe that the concept paper will help guide your answers as well. The concept paper template. Relevance and alignment is around 10 points, articulation of need, 10 points, ESO programming, 10 points. And the bulk of most of the points of what we're looking for is project feasibility and infrastructure development plan, the fiscal overview and scope of the work, and the anticipated impact. And lastly, evidence of success and staff qualifications. Our purpose of showing how the rubric will be weighted is just to be as transparent as possible and help guide how much effort you are putting into specific sections. And lastly, summary and quick tips before we'll open it up for the Q&A. So in summary, TDA will fund up to $5 million in capital expenses reimbursement after the execution of a grant agreement with MassCEC. 25% cost share is required. Capital projects must be completed within 1 to 3 years of the award. And costs for all budget items must be incurred after the award is given. The timeline, the RFP released July 22nd with concept papers due in about a month, September 12th, 2025. Full applications are due November 14th, and the notification of awards are expected to be spring 2026. Eligibility includes ESOs that are nonprofits or public incubators, innovation centers, education institutions, and entrepreneur networks. The nonprofit or public is meant to extend to all of these, so a nonprofit or public university or college. The ESO must have at least 5 years of operating history, and there should be a track record of supporting climate tech research and development. And here's some tips of what we're really hoping for in concept papers and proposals. That successful projects will be accessible to as many climate tech entrepreneurs and researchers as possible in Massachusetts. That these projects will be used for testing and demonstrating emerging climate technologies, and that they will remain in use for over 10 years. There's a specific emphasis on that shared aspect that I mentioned before, just to make sure that the project is as accessible to as many climate tech entrepreneurs and researchers in Massachusetts. So we'd love to see detailed plans on how that can be done in your concept papers. And now we'll open it up to the Q&A. All Q&As will be posted on the TDA website August 19th, but we're gonna try our best to answer as many as possible. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a option for Q&A. And I see some people have already been putting in questions. So without further ado, let's start diving in and answering them. Would real estate purchasing for a co-working space be a viable capital expenditure? Leslie, you said you'd like to answer this question?
Yeah, or any of us. I just figured it'd be easier to answer it live. I've been typing, by the way, so maybe after we're done answering the questions, we can read out some of the ones that I have typed answers to that were easier to just answer over writing. But the ones that we left there, we can discuss verbally. So the first question, would real estate purchasing for a co-working space be a viable capital expenditure under this program? I would say yes, assuming all the other elements of the RFP are met with this particular project. So the space must, of course, be owned and operated by an ESO, that's a nonprofit, a public entity that has climate tech, that also facilitates testing and demonstration. So I think if there's equipment that's going to go in there, if it's adjacent to an existing, equipment space. So there's a lot of questions I would have as a follow-up. So I would say just read through the RFP. But that would be, purchasing space counts as a capital expenditure. But there's a lot of other elements of the RFP that we just want to ensure are met. So I would encourage you to read through the eligibility, section 8, and then the evaluation criteria so you can see how that idea or project of yours would fit into a competitive round. And Benny, of course, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, you did a great job.
So yeah, Benny, if you want to keep going through the questions, answer the ones you want, pass them to me. We can tag team, whatever works. There's a couple others in here.
Sounds good. I'll go through them based off of when they were sent. So the next one is from Jessica. Are you looking to get feedback from startups to help specify what kinds of facilities would be useful? Absolutely. If you are already in connection with some startups that are saying, hey, we really need these specific equipment or facilities to help scale in Massachusetts, that'd be great. They can submit a letter of support with your concept paper. Yeah, we would love to see that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think from an ESO or applicant to this program's perspective, any justification for your proposed project that you can show from the startup or entrepreneur or researcher community would be great. Whether you've conducted a survey already and you have a project in mind and you just need the funding, or if you have letters of support, like Benny said. So, from an applicant perspective, that would be great as a boost to your proposal. Of course, it only helps the articulation of need kind of section that we're asking. But if you, the person asking this question, is from a startup, Mass CEC right now doesn't have a formal mechanism to take in suggestions of ways that we would review project proposals. But I think getting in touch with any of the ESOs that maybe are in your network and sharing what you need would probably be the best method for that.
Great. And the next question is, what is the motivation for only considering organizations 5+ years old? The motivation here is we want to fund projects from organizations that have sustainable lasting power. So organizations that have a sustainable business model, sustainable funding model, have had existing proof that they could fulfill some of these programs or projects, just to make sure that whenever we're awarding some of these grants, that they're going to organizations with long-term return on investment for Mass CEC in Massachusetts.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. Great.
Is there a minimum of 1.5 million budget requirement, or can projects with a smaller budget be submitted? We are ideally looking for programs within the allotted 1.5 to 5 million. So no projects with a smaller budget cannot be submitted. The next question from Tim. Are co-working spaces included within eligible project areas, or is it just limited to lab and maker spaces? Yes, co-working spaces are included, similar to lab and maker spaces. Are subcontracts allowed? For example, could an educational institution purchase innovative or pilot phase equipment that is not yet commercialized? Leslie, do you know how to answer this?
Yeah, I think we might need a little more context, but let me try to take a stab and follow up if I'm not on the mark here. So if you own or operate a facility, if you're an ESO or an educational facility, and you want to adopt or install some kind of new emerging technology as part of your capital project, I would say that this might not be the right fit for that. If it's just like, I want to install new windows for our educational facility, for example, like this new kind of window, that would probably not be the right fit for this program. This is meant to be shared infrastructure and equipment that can be used by lots of different researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, startup companies. So if that's the kind of project in mind, we actually have a different program that might be more eligible for that. We have a couple of other programs that we can chat with you about. But if you're saying you just want to sub out the work, if the educational facility doesn't want to directly be the general contractor leading and general manager leading the project, and you want to sub out the work, then that's fine. We do allow for subcontractors. Obviously, we don't expect all the applicants to be doing any of this themselves per se. And if you want to use, a newer company to do the work, I think that's fine. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. If you want to follow up and type in more, we're happy to try to answer it better. But this program is really made for, as Benny said, ESOs and educational facilities who are looking to add capital style projects to their infrastructure and make that accessible to as many researchers and startups as possible so we can further the commercialization of climate technologies in Massachusetts. So if you feel like that is ringing true for you, then you're in the right place.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Moving on to the next question. Is the template a guide or do we need to populate the Word doc provided? I'm assuming this question's about the concept paper template. You will need to populate the Word doc provided. It's formatted in a table, so you can enter your questions, your answers in the second column of the table and submit that. Next question. My ESO works with many startups that have climate tech applicability, but they might not describe themselves as purely climate tech startup. How do you go about vetting if an ESO has 20 to 50% climate tech membership? That's a great question. In the concept paper, it'll specifically ask how many of your members are just startups, agnostically, then specifically climate tech. We encourage you to look at the definition of what climate tech is in the RFP, and to see if your startups fit that mold, and then be able to enter in the specific number of how many climate tech startups are in your organization in the application of the concept paper. Leslie, any additional
No,
color?
that's it. Just, yeah, do your best to communicate. We understand many don't self-identify as climate tech, but just do your best to communicate how you feel you meet that criteria. If there's a little bit of a Venn diagram of your startups, for example, ag tech, straddles all different types of sector types, for example. So yeah, perfect. Many thanks.
Yeah, of course. Next question from Judith. Was the decision for not including ESOs that are public benefit corporations reached through specific language in the legislation? We ask because INBIA and other similar organizations all show that open innovation hubs, open to all, are only economically sustainable when they are for profit. Nonprofit hubs usually fail after year five unless they have annual financial support. In other words, they are not self-sustaining. Thank you. I don't know the answer to this question.
I could take it. So, happy to chat offline. I think there's a lot of questions around. I think there's another question coming up in this thread too about public benefit corporations. So, the RFP is written. The RFP has the eligibility criteria, and the criteria is that this program is intended to support publicly owned or nonprofit entities. Hear your point. There's also nonprofit academic institutions, for example, that would be eligible, or publicly owned not academic institutions or ESOs otherwise. This is something that we had made the decision on under a long process here, largely due to the funding source and ways that we want to make sure we're reducing the amount of risk for the Commonwealth, and that's just for this round. So what is in the RFP is is not subject to change at this point. However, we're happy to take input and consider it in future rounds. Bond funding in the state has a precedent of largely supporting these types of entities. If you look at other organizations that have run similar programs like Mass CC is trying to run, it is typically restricted to public and nonprofit for a variety of reasons. So again, happy to take it under consideration for future rounds, but what is written now is the RFP for this round. Thanks.
Great. Next question. Can the purpose of this grant include capital expansion for an ongoing demonstration project funded by Mass CC? For example, if we are currently running a project under the Innovate Mass program and are looking to scale to additional locations as part of the demonstration, would that be considered eligible?
No, I don't think so. You're anonymous. I'm not sure if you're a startup yourself or otherwise, but Innovate Mass, the program is intended to support startups doing demonstration projects of emerging technologies. This program is not that kind of program. We do have another program that would be a great natural successor to Innovate Mass that also just launched, and it's called Critical Mass. That program, the applicant would be a startup who is looking to scale beyond a first demonstration project. So if that's the sweet spot you're looking for, if you are an innovator and a startup looking to kind of do more with your demonstration project and scale it, please look at Critical Mass. That program is open now as well and is also new to Mass CC. But this program is really for organizations, not startups directly. So an organization that has shared lab or infrastructure equipment that many startups can use. That's the applicant type that we're looking for in this program.
Great. Moving on to Chris's question, does the ESO need to be a nonprofit 501? Yes. the ESO does need to be a nonprofit. Next question. I think the next question from the anonymous attendee is more so feedback. Thank you for sharing your feedback. Really appreciate it. And we'll make sure to put it into consideration. Do educational institutions need to show 20 to 50% membership related to climate tech? How would they achieve or demonstrate this? Great question. We could get back to you and on more about how you might demonstrate this. One initial example might be is if a specific lab or center at the university is applying for this grant, then they would be able to showcase the 20 to 50% membership versus the entire university or educational institution. But I'm happy to follow up with that question, and we'll drop our email in the chat.
Yeah, and I think too for educational institutions, given that you're likely long-standing, maybe you're upgrading an existing lab, for example, and adding a specific piece of equipment, you might be able to show like who signed in to use that lab equipment and what type of classes they teach or research they publish, right? Like this might be a way, even though it's not membership based maybe, but maybe it's researcher accessed. You might be able to categorize this type of, membership is a loose term. We understand not everyone's business model includes traditional membership style. So, try your best to just show who's using or would use the space. And that's kind of what we mean by for membership. If that helps also. And like Benny said, we could chat offline more if there's specific questions that we haven't gotten to.
Understood. Follow up on the subcontract question. Our case is the installation of innovative thermal storage in a campus geothermal district energy system. We have ongoing research projects, but can make data accessible to researchers, etc. I can't remember off the top of my head what the subcontractor question is, but if you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to the innovation ecosystem at MassCEC, and we can help guide you.
Yeah, and I would say even just describing this project, right? Installation of thermal storage in a geothermal district energy system, that doesn't feel like that would be shared equipment that researchers and startups could come and use to test and further their own technologies. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe the intention is to set up a test geothermal network that anyone can come and test on. And if you need a subcontractor to do that, fine. But again, the real purpose here is to make whatever MassCEC is granting to be a shared, accessible piece of equipment or space for others. So I just want to also just underline that part, even though we might not be answering the subcontractor question, just kind of getting to the project intention.
Thank you, Leslie. Next question from Tim. In terms of MassCEC's objectives with the program, will more or less weight be put on towards proposals that could be seen as more transformative, i.e. something big, new, and exciting, versus proposals that cover more of the mundane day-to-day improvements that would lead to a greater ongoing productivity? We hear a lot from our startups about the need for both, but the latter can be a bit more challenging to fundraise for. Example, we need to improve our Wi-Fi. Yeah, that is a great question. I would say it all comes down to your application and how you can demonstrate the impact that your project will have. The larger and longer and more sustainable impact that you can have on the ecosystem generally will be more favorably viewed in the application.
Yeah, and I would also say, as far as the question of will there be more or less weight put towards anything, all the evaluation criteria is listed in section 8. Thank you, Benny, of the RFP and the points associated with each of those criteria. So that is how the proposals will be scored and weighted. And if it's not mentioned there, it's not part of the evaluation process. So I just want to be make sure that I'm pointing folks to our very transparent review criteria, and you should look at those categories and think about how they're weighted and how maybe this part of your proposal fits into that and how you want to position the project.
Yeah. The next question. All the examples listed in response to the 11-20 questions seem like physical things, but the GAAP capital expenses seem more broad. Where does this call make the cutoff? Great question. Our requirements are narrower than the overarching GAAP capital expenses. If you look at the general, the contract agreements, the sample contract agreement that is on the website, it'll specifically list out the differences from GAAP and expand on them more. Um, and yeah, Leslie, do you have any other things that you'd like to say there?
Yeah, no, and I mean, not specific to this question, but a little bit broad to everyone on the call as well. As is with any solicitation, it's the sum of its parts, right? So the whole RFP paints the picture of what the types of project that will be competitive are. It's not that a software element would be completely ineligible if it meets all the criteria of being something capital and, all the others. There's a minimum of 1.5 million. There's a max of 5 million. Does it meet all the evaluation criteria and speak really strongly to all those evaluation criteria? So, I just want to take a step back and say software or other types of non-hardware elements might not be ineligible, but they should meet all the criteria of what the intention is and be paired with something that is more physical. I would say like an exclusively software or IT related element might not be as competitive if you read the solicitation and see what the goals are. So that's all. I just wanted to kind of underline looking through the whole RFP and seeing if your project speaks to all of those evaluation criteria and eligibility criteria. But we are definitely more narrow than the GAAP. It's just we say has to be something physical or something that is capital and also meets the GAAP as capital.
Great. Thank you. And I'm just looking at the answered questions of the ones that Leslie typed an answer to previously, if we wanted to go over those.
Yeah, that might be good in case folks missed them. If they weren't paying attention to the chat, we could narrate them for everyone to hear.
Yeah. Um, Is there a budget plan, budget slash a plan for this to be an annual regular program? The answer is Mass CC hopes this program runs again in future years. However, all funding is subject to approval and authorization on an annual basis, as is the case with all of our grant programs. So the hope is yes. The hope is yes. The budget and political landscape can always change, but the hope is yes. Um, if you have been operating for 3.5 years, is there still a way to still apply for the grant, or would you need to wait for a future round? No, you would have to be operating for at least 5 years in order to be considered eligible.
And I think we answered some of the other ones on like similar lines of thought. Yeah, I think that's it because I think the other ones were answered again verbally later in a different way.
Mhm.
Right, Benny, is that your read on this? I don't think
Yeah,
there's any other unique questions that I had typed answers to. Great.
yeah, awesome.
We got a new
Um,
one in though, actually just now.
would a public utility consider to be an eligible entity for a demonstration project that could be used for educational purposes? Um, I'm not sure.
Possibly, again, kind of to my last point of reading through the whole RFP, I think with just this one question, I'd want to know more before a definitive yes or no. But I think if the project meets the goals of the program and is shared and accessible space, um, then it would be. But if it's just for educational purposes, but no one can use the project that you install the equipment, that probably wouldn't be the right fit. I think just showcasing something for talking and educational overlay is not something that we've articulated as a goal in the program, but a shared access to it. Like if you were to allow a startup to come or a researcher to come and use whatever this demonstration project is for their own testing and demonstrating of their own technology, great. If it's like a innovative type of like storage system and now all the startups in Massachusetts can come and use this storage system to test out their storage related technologies, that could work, but just for educational purposes. I don't think so. Hesitant to give a hard no without knowing more. So would encourage you just to read through the RFP a little bit and then let us know if you have more questions over writing.
Awesome. If there are any more questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section, and we'd be happy to answer them. All right. Thanks again, everyone, so much for attending this webinar. It is and has been recorded, so we will upload this to our TDA website. We are going to document all of these questions and answers and put together a sheet, also upload that to the website. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to our innovation ecosystem at masscec.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.